Hello, this is Connie. I will be your tutorial host for today, and in this tutorial I'll be explaining some lesser known or otherwise less communicated functionality in Hammer that I find people don't tend to really talk about. Just some subtle stuff that I find quite helpful when making maps. First, I want to talk about nudging. If you go to Tools, Options, and go to the 2D Views tab, you'll see a checkbox that says arrow keys nudge selected object or vertex. If you turn this on, then when you click on an object in either the 2D or 3D views and press the arrow keys, it'll nudge it around depending on whatever your snap to grid size is. Note that it does not align things to the grid, it simply offsets it by whatever your grid size is, which can be helpful sometimes. But that's something to just be aware of when you're using nudging. It'll nudge depending on wherever your mouse is. So if I put my mouse over the 3D view, it'll nudge based on where my camera is. If I put my mouse over the top view, it'll nudge based on that angle, and same for all of the other viewports. It's one of those things that I find helpful because then I don't have to drag my mouse across the whole screen. Note that this will interfere with your workflow if you use the arrow keys to move the camera around. So if you do that, then maybe this is less applicable, but it's something to consider. Also, while you're nudging, if you hold Shift and press one of the arrow keys, it will create a duplicate of whatever you're nudging. And if you hold Control while pressing the arrow keys, it'll nudge the object by only 1 unit, which can help you offset things at small unit sizes without having to change your grid size all the way down to 1. Next, I want to talk about centering origins. If you click on a brush entity and you have this button up here, the Toggle Helpers button enabled, you'll see this little circle. Normally this circle is supposed to be in the middle of an object. But in this case, it's not centered. Either I accidentally dragged it out into the void, or I just wasn't paying attention. Something happened and it's no longer centered. Now because this circle is out in the middle of the void, it will cause a leak, which is bad. So, if you right-click on the selected brush in the 2D view, you can click Center Origins, and it'll bring the origin right back to the center of the brush. This also works on multiple brushes, so if you select a whole bunch of brushes and press Center Origins, it'll center all of the origins to each of their respective brushes. Now I want to talk about snapping selections to the grid. So, if you have something in your map that is not aligned with the grid, you can click on it, and if you right-click on it in the 2D view, you can see the button that says Snap to Grid, and if you press that, it will snap your selection to the nearest grid, depending on what your snap to grid size currently is. Note that if you right-click it, it also says Control B next to it. So, if you want to streamline your workflow even more, you can press Control B and it'll do it. So that's one of those hotkeys that I tend to remember. Additionally, if you have a whole set of objects that are off-grid separately, you can press Control-Shift-B and it'll align all of them separately. So that's also quite handy. This one isn't too obscure. I find that people do still talk about it, but it's hidden behind a context menu, so I'm going to mention it anyway. Under Map, there's the option Entity Report. An Entity Report will list all of the entities currently in your map, and it'll show you their target name as well. You can filter by everything, brush entities, point entities, you can hide hidden objects, you can also search by key value. So if you want to search for something with a specific name, you can put in target name, and then the name, and it'll show you all the entities that have that name, or if you want it to be exact, you can set it to be exact, etc. I find it helpful when maps are really big and you have a lot of entities, or when you have a lot of entities that are named the same thing and you need to select all of them, because there is a button here, Properties, that lets you open the properties of everything that you have selected. Now this might be a bit heinous of me, but I actually like to use Hammer like this, and the reason why is because if you hover your mouse over a 2D view and press Tab, it will cycle the 2D view between all 3 options, front, side, and top. So I find that this just saves space. It gives me more space to work with the 3D view and with the 2D view, because I can just swap between all of them at any given time. If I put my mouse in the top left, if I forget what view I'm in, it'll tell me. Otherwise though, if you've tried this and you don't like it, you can press Control A and it'll reset all of your viewports to be equal size, which is nice. The texture application tool is a very important tool for modders. I mean, it's what you use to, apply textures. But at the bottom right of the window, there's a button that people don't usually tend to look at. It's the mode button. Under this mode, there's a variety of different functionalities that you can choose from for the texture application tool. If you choose lift, it'll take the texture and its values, but not select the face. Conversely, if you click select, it'll select the face but not copy the texture or its values. Apply texture only and apply texture and values are pretty self-explanatory, but there's one unique option, align to view, which I think is more for fun. I can't see much of a practical reason for it, but I figure I'd go over it because it's unique functionality that I don't believe exists anywhere else in Hammer. If you select align to view and you go towards a brush face, and you look at it at an oblique angle, and you click on it, it'll skew the texture to match the orientation of your camera relative to the face. And it's weird. It's strange because this is the only time I can see in vanilla Hammer, at least, brush face skewing being possible. And this does appear in-game. And you can see that it does appear in the game itself, which is strange, and I'm not sure why it's locked behind this specific button, and why there's not a more delicate and nuanced way of doing this rather than just based on your camera view. But it's something that's there if you ever need to skew a texture. There are a variety of ways that you can move objects into Visgroups. The one most people do is they go into the Properties menu, go to Visgroup, and just select a Visgroup, or go into the Edit Groups tab, and click New Group and create a Visgroup. I don't like this because it's annoying. It's pretty straightforward once you get to know it. So if you do like doing it that way, that's fine. But there is an alternative way. If you go under View, Move Selection to Visgroup, it'll open a completely different dialog that allows you to put your selection into a Visgroup. You can place it into an existing Visgroup, or you can create a new Visgroup. You can also choose to hide it or remove it from all other Visgroups. It just generally gives you more control over what you want your Visgroup to be. Now, if you're working in a very large map, you may find that your 2D viewports get misplaced, and they just end up in areas where you're like, I don't know where this is, or everything is so dense and crowded that you can't tell what you're looking at. But let's say you want to use the 2D view to move something. We already mentioned nudging, but in case nudging isn't an option for you, you can click on the object that you want to center on in the 3D view, press Ctrl E, and it will center all of your 2D views on that object. Conversely, if your 3D view is lost somewhere, you can press Ctrl-Shift-E and it'll center your 3D view on it. So those are some nice ways to get your camera in the places that it needs to be in larger maps. The last thing I want to cover is the Hijack launch parameter. It's technically a feature of the game itself and not Hammer, but you're most likely only ever going to be using this through Hammer, so I figured I'd cover it. If you go into your compile window, make sure you're in the expert window and not the normal window. You can see under the game command, you can add parameters. If you add the hijack command after the dev command, what will happen is when you run the game through Hammer, it will not give you a pop-up saying that there's more than one instance of the game running and that it can't do that. Instead, it will directly hijack, as the launch parameter suggests, your game and will automatically load your map for you, even if it's already loaded, so it can also function as a reload of your map. I like this because it's very easy to keep track of. So having a launch parameter that sets you back to the start of your map, I find helpful because most likely, if you're compiling your map and testing your map, you're not going to be sitting right in the starting position all the time. So you can just glance at your game window, and if you're in the starting position, you can assume, oh, my map finished compiling. Yeah, that's one of those things that I find helpful, and that I think is just a nice quality of life thing. That's all the functionality I'm going to cover in this tutorial. I figured I'd keep it relatively short and concise with all the features that I mentioned. Mostly just things that you can use to speed up your workflow a bit, and just lower your workload so you don't have to do everything manually. Stay tuned for more tutorials from the various tutorial hosts from the Portal Mapping and Modding server, which if you're interested in portal mapping and modding, you can also join. And we're a community there who can help. And there's lots of resources there. So, yeah. Hope this was helpful.